Welcome back. I decided to go with a Blazers jersey, which is WHA, because why not? Sure, why not? I'll wear a WHA jersey. Not a lot of movement on this week's power rankings because we're right near the end of the season. I was pretty happy with where teams were, and there's a lot of teams that moved up and moved back. Teams moved down and moved back up by the end of the week. It happens. All right, so we'll start things off at number 32, and we're starting with the Sharks. The Sharks dropped one spot from last week, and they're right back in the bottom. So 32nd on the power rankings. I'm going to be getting interviewed by NBC Sports San Jose on Monday. Hopefully this doesn't make the interview go badly. So Brody, if you see this, I apologize, but yeah, they're 32nd this week. But at any rate, a 4-goal lead evaporating against Chicago ensured that. Number 31, moving up one spot from last week, Anaheim. So California occupies the bottom two spots on the board. Not a huge surprise to see them at the bottom of the board, of course. They've not had great seasons. And so Anaheim switches places with San Jose this week. Number 30. Same spot as last week, Chicago. The Hawks are picking up wins here and there. They've now reached 20 wins on the season. And you know what? That's respectable, considering the roster they had at the start of the year. Which, I mean, it was a dog's breakfast, and then all the injuries, and of course there's the whole Corey Perry thing that happens, and Hall's out for the year and all that. But they've actually cobbled together a half-decent record, considering the roster they have, so nothing but respect for what Chicago's been able to do this season. We'll see what they do in the offseason to start building things back up. Again, the teardown's the easy part. It's the building back up that's difficult. Number 29, also in the same spot as last week, the Blue Jackets of Columbus. So Columbus tonight, they allowed 47 shots. Last night they allowed what was 50, but I guess they changed it to 51 when the game was done. So 98 shots against in 2 games. Not the kind of defense you want to see, even though I understand they're playing out the string. But those are troubling trends that they have going on. We'll see if they can reverse them over this coming week. But yeah, Columbus, the last couple of games, not ones that they're going to be all that happy about. Number 28, dropping one spot from last week, the Arizona Coyotes. So the Coyotes dropped one spot from last week. They're playing out the string as well. They had the loss against Dallas as one that is just memorable because that was Dallas taking over and doing what Dallas should do against Arizona. And now they play again tomorrow, so we'll see if Arizona can eke out a win there. But they are playing out the string as teams in the bottom row are doing right now. Number 27, also dropping one spot from last week, Montreal. So the Montreal Canadiens are down to 27th. They're competitive. The effort's there. I think they're playing well at times, but they just don't have what they need to get those wins right now. That being said, if Marty St. Louis stays behind the bench going into next year, if they make the right moves in the offseason, Montreal should start moving up. But yeah, they don't move up this week. They dropped the one spot. So who moved past them this week? Well, a team moving up 2 spots from last week. Just the 2, and that's Ottawa. So the Ottawa Senators, there's the Scooby-Doo eyes for you. Number 26 this week. And for Ottawa, relatively successful for them kind of week. They do finish it out with that win in New Jersey, and they're a team that's playing out the string as well. But again, going into New Jersey and winning like that, you're playing the spoiler role. You do it well enough, you can move up on the power rankings board. Number 25, and this is fast for me to get through this bottom row because there's not a whole lot to add with these teams right now. I will have more detail with the others. But number 25, same spot as last week, Pittsburgh. The Penguins do not get out of the bottom row. So this is where we have a little bit more to discuss. The Pittsburgh Penguins right now are at a bit of a crossroads, aren't they? What are they going to do with Karlsson? There's already all this talk about, are they going to have to move Karlsson? Probably. If they're going to go into a retool or rebuild, however you want to look at it, they're going to need cap space to make that work. Karlsson may very well find himself on the move again. So we'll see what Pittsburgh does in the offseason. There's some good parts there. There's a good team in there, but there's also some aging star players. And Crosby, while he's still one of the best players in the game, is not the game breaker that he was 10, 15 years ago. And it's part of how that aging process works. The Capitals right now are defying it. The Penguins have not been able to do the same. So there's your bottom row. None of these teams right now are really in the race, even though Pittsburgh is, I think, 7 points back right now, that last playoff spot, but they're trending in the wrong direction. They're 3-6-1 in their last 10. So that's your bottom row. No arguments yet. Shouldn't be. Number 24, same spot as last week as well. New Jersey Devils. Devils were moving up. And then tonight happened, and they didn't. So if I had done the power rankings last night, New Jersey would have moved up. I would have talked about how, there's a little bit of fight in them yet. And then tonight happened against the Ottawa Senators. I should know better. I don't. But I should. I should with the way the season's gone, but there's still in the back of my mind, like, this is too good of a team. What's going on? The defense is what's going on. Tonight, Jake Allen got lit up. I wouldn't put that on Allen. That was on the defense. I thought that Ottawa had much too easy of a time getting into New Jersey's zone and generating goals. All right, number 23 this week, dropping 2 spots from last week. And it's Seattle. So Seattle, outside of that 9-game winning streak, remember the 9-game winning streak? They looked really good during the 9-game winning streak. Outside of that, it's been a rough year for the Seattle Kraken. And I don't know how you fix this necessarily. I think Matty Beniers has got to bounce back in year 3. There's some contracts to get signed. They have cap space this summer. Maybe they bring in some additions. But yeah, for Seattle, there might have been a shine on this team coming into the season and a belief they could follow up and get another playoff run. There's still commentators that still believe this team's not far off. I'm not as convinced that they're not far off. I think that this is a team that could use a couple of pretty big names to really turn things around. The good news is Seattle can offer money, and I think they'll be able to get that done. Number 22, moving up 1 spot from last week, the Buffalo Sabres. The Buffalo Sabres, it's been a long year. Once again, they put themselves in a rough spot early on in the season when it came to hopes for the playoffs, and they got to within a few points of a playoff spot, and then this road trip has just kind of sunk it. But I think they've played well at points. I don't feel like they've played badly. They're too far behind, and it is what it is. So Buffalo just moves up to 1 spot. I felt like they've played a little better than Seattle has recently, but if you want to switch those two around, you can. Just on your computer, on your phone, you flip them. You flip them. So I'll just stand here. It doesn't work. All right, number 21, dropping 1 spot from last week. So not a huge change, but the Flames dropped the 1 spot. Now, the Flames are in an interesting position because obviously all their free agents got sold off. So slowly as the season's gone along, the team's been weakened. And it is now a team that is not the same as they were to start the year. The offseason's going to be very, very interesting for them. Clearly not a playoff team this year, but there's enough pieces there that if Markstrom wants out, you could have a fascinating trade coming through for Jacob Markstrom. I will be very interested to see what the Calgary Flames do this summer. So the Flames at number 21 this week. Number 20, moving up 2 spots from last week. Just the 2, Detroit. The Red Wings move up 2 spots from last week. I think they're still 3-7 in their last 10. So I do have some concerns, but they get a win today. And did they win this morning or was it last night? I don't know. What are days? At any rate, Detroit, I think, is likely going to get that last playoff spot in the East. It just feels like they should, although Washington's got something to say about that as well. I don't know what to expect if Detroit does make the playoffs. Oh, no, they lost today against Nashville 1-0. That's right, and that's after they won their last game with that comeback overtime winner by Patrick Kane. See, the brain clicks in. It can take a little bit more time. It's sort of like those processors on old computers are a little bit slower. Yeah, that's what happens to your brain as you get older. And it's not like I drink, so you can't blame that. Anyways, Detroit, number 20 this week. So moving in the right direction. Should reach the playoffs. Again, the Capitals are going to have something to say about that. Number 19, same spot as last week. And I really wanted to move them up, but Minnesota didn't really afford me much of a chance to move them up this week. The Wild are in an interesting position that, I mean, they got a point today against St. Louis, but they needed two. And the odds of them reaching the playoffs, I think St. Louis has more of an inside track on that than they do. The problem being Vegas has started playing better too. So Vegas has started winning games, and that's going to make it so neither Minnesota or St. Louis can catch them if we stay at this pace. But yeah, Minnesota stays in the same spot as last week. Number 18, dropping 3 spots from last week. Now, I don't know at what point Patrick Waugh says, you know what, I'll go in net. Varlamov, out you go. Sorokin, out you go. I'll just put on some pads. I'll go in the net. I'll show you guys how it's done. All kidding aside, the New York Islanders, I don't know if they're going to make it. That race in the East is fascinating to me because one week the Islanders can look fantastic. The next week they look awful. Same thing Detroit has going on. One week they look great. Next week it's awful. And it has to be really frustrating for the coaches. It has to be really frustrating for Patrick Waugh. Like today, they get the really big win over the Winnipeg Jets. But for him, it has to be like, okay, where was that a while ago? Where was that sense of urgency a while ago? So they got the desperate hockey today. If they get the desperate hockey some more, they'll move back up into the top 2 rows. Number 17, same spot as last week. The St. Louis Blues. So for the Blues, again, it feels like they're running out of runway. I do think Vegas is going to hold on to that final playoff spot in the West, but St. Louis, they get the big game from Kyrou today. Binnington made the saves when they needed them, and they overcame a pretty rambunctious group in the Minnesota Wild. So St. Louis has had a good enough run that I think that if in the offseason they decided to not make huge changes and decided to keep things mostly the same, I don't think people will be too upset. I don't think St. Louis is that far from being a playoff team. Not just because of where they are in the standings, but I think going forward they could still find their way into the playoffs. The emergence of Jake Neighbors as a goal scorer has been nice this year. So that's your bottom half. And are any of these above the playoff line? Just Detroit. I think Detroit's the only one that's technically above the playoff line that's in the 3rd row. So we get into the top 16. And the top 16 starts with a team that's not in the playoffs currently, but they're only 1 point out. They play tomorrow at home against the Jets. So for the Washington Capitals, if they could beat the Jets, they're above the playoff line again. Washington had an up and down week. So they had that sloppy game against Carolina. Neither team getting saves when they need them. They get the point in the shootout, and that was after they had that rough loss against Toronto. So with Washington, I want to see a little more consistency and, see them have that full 60 minutes, which we didn't see a lot of this week. So again, they're 1 point back of Detroit. We'll see if they can pass Detroit tomorrow. They're in the top half of the board, so I feel like they're playing well enough to reach the playoffs. We'll see if they get there. Number 15, moving up 3 spots from last week, Philadelphia. And that's tied for the most that anybody moved up this week. So there was no dramatic move up or down the board this week. Philadelphia moves up 3 spots, and tomorrow they're playing against the Florida Panthers, who they've already beaten twice this year. So we'll see how Philadelphia does in that one. But for the Flyers, yeah, this season's been a real up and down, interesting. Just interesting from day one because nobody expected them to be in the playoffs. Then you bench Couturier. You don't want to talk about it. He's a healthy scratch. Then he goes back into the lineup, but the team's winning. So when the team's winning and all that's going on, it kind of becomes background noise. So as much as people want to talk about how Tortorella's a joke and he's a dinosaur and he can't coach, hey, this team was supposed to be bottom 5 in the National Hockey League and they're in a playoff spot right now. So Tortorella's doing something right. We may not be all that happy with how he's treated Couturier over the last few games here, but something he's doing works. So I can't begrudge a coach when the team's winning. It's the same as people who get mad at Lou Lamoriello for all these moves are stupid. But generally, the Islanders have achieved pretty well under Lou Lamoriello. All right, number 14. Same spot as last week. The Golden Knights of Vegas. The Vegas Golden Knights, there have been a lot of comebacks. The fact they've needed comebacks is one thing that's a bit alarming for Vegas. Those get a little tougher in the playoffs. But if the playoffs started today, they would play the Vancouver Canucks in the first round, which I've seen Canuck fans saying, "Oh yeah, no, we want that." I don't know if we do. I don't generally know if we do. If it's Vegas, the defending Stanley Cup champions, I'm not sure that's the matchup you want for the relatively inexperienced Vancouver Canucks. But at any rate, whatever happens from here, it looks like Vegas is going to get probably that second wild card because Nashville's not stopping. I think Nashville's going to try to push their way into the top three in that division. I have no idea, but it definitely means Vegas either ends up being the number one wild card or maybe they catch and pass LA. Vancouver has a game against LA on Monday. I know that because I'm going to that game. And so maybe that's the night that Vegas ends up being the number three team, and then maybe Vancouver ends up playing LA in the first round, which the last time Vancouver was the number one seed in the West and the number 8 seed was LA. Didn't go all that well for Vancouver. Maybe it goes different this time. Number 13 this week, dropping one spot from last week, the Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Lightning just dropped one spot. And again, it was just more of what happened tonight. In fact, we'll just do this as a twofer. All right. So number 12 on the board, and then we'll talk about 12 and 13 is the LA Kings. So the LA Kings get the win tonight in overtime, so I felt like, all right, I'll have LA at 12 and Tampa Bay at 13. Tampa Bay's playing really well right now. LA, I think, is playing well too. Now they're within, 3 points of the Edmonton Oilers. So, yeah, the LA Kings, the Tampa Bay Lightning are also teams playing well. Like, when you look at the bracket, you go look at the playoff bracket, if the playoffs start today, it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick. Once we know who's playing who in the playoffs, I'm going to put all the polls up on the channel. I expect a lot of the polls to be quite near 50-50 for who people think is going to win. And as I've said, I think this could be a year where we see lower seeds taking out higher seeds because we're overdue for a year like that. And Tampa Bay and LA are both looking like they're going to be lower seeds. So LA, I think, is more dangerous this year than last year, but we'll find out come playoff time whether or not that's the case. And Tampa Bay, I don't know if I want to play Tampa Bay in the first round. Hedman's had a nice bounce back year, and Stamkos needs himself a contract. So best way to get a contract from Tampa is a nice long playoff run so that the GM can't move on from you. All right, number 11, just before we get into the top 10, is Boston. Boston Bruins drop a couple of spots from last week. Boston, I just have some concerns with Boston. I've had these concerns the whole way through, and I don't think today did anything to allay those concerns. So, yeah. The Boston Bruins have had their issues, and depth down the middle, I think, is something to keep an eye on with them come playoff time. Because very often the teams that win in the playoffs, you look at their 1 through 4 down the middle, pretty spotless. You don't have to have a superstar either. Just 1 through 4 be really, really solid. And I don't know when you look at Boston how they match up against other teams in the East. I don't know if they have that. But at any rate, Boston's overachieved. They're definitely higher in the standings than most people, including myself, picked them to be this year. Number 10, moving up one spot from last week. See, Dallas doesn't have to be out to be 11th. They're 10th. Dallas moves up one spot. They're 8-2 in their last 10. I was impressed with them against Arizona, but it is Arizona. And so tomorrow they're against Arizona as well. For Dallas, it will be interesting to see how the playoffs go for them too. Ottinger's had his shaky games. He's also had his good games. They need playoff Ottinger from that series against the Flames, but that was a couple of years ago now. So we'll see what happens with Dallas from here, but they're in the top 10, so I have moved them up one spot for Dallas fans. So there you go. Number 9 on the board, dropping one spot from last week. So out of the top row, the Winnipeg Jets. So the Jets drop one spot. I did inform my wife before starting this video. I said, just so you know, Jets have dropped out of the top row. And her answer was, well, yeah. The Jets have had their struggles with consistency lately, and I would not be surprised if they can't get this together. Like tomorrow they have the early game, and if it continues, they will probably find themselves down. They could find themselves down like 12th next week if they can't find more consistency. But yeah, so the Winnipeg Jets, hopefully they turn it around, but they're in Washington. That's not going to be easy. Washington is not going to be an easy out for them. All right, so we move into the top row. We all good? We all good? Everybody hating and typing away furiously. Stupid hockey guy, stupid hockey guy. Make sure you get that all in there. All right, number 8 this week, dropping 2 spots from last week. The Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers tonight losing 6-3 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto was up 5-0 going into the third period in that one, and then they just had trouble, I think, focusing in that last 30 minutes. So the Oilers drop a couple of spots this week. They now sit 10 points back of first place, so I don't think they have a chance at first place. And I only say that because, as a Canuck fan, I don't want to come out with these definite statements that can come back to haunt me later. That's what a lot of it is. A lot of it is if I make definite statements about teams I root for, it can come back to haunt me, which goes back to my high school days. So that's why I don't crow and get all like gung-ho with my own team, because I learned over 30 years ago, don't just quiet, and wait. And then you can cheer when they win. Just wait. Just don't crow about it until it's done. All right, so Edmonton's down to number 8. Number 7 this week, moving up 3 spots from last week, the Vancouver Canucks. So the Canucks move up to number 7 on the board. They were number 10 last week. They're having a good homestand. Now, keep in mind the teams that they're beating, not necessarily playoff teams. I think LA is going to be a really good test. LA's been a good team on the road. Vancouver's played well. It'll be interesting to see on Monday. I think we go with DeSmith again. I don't mean to say we, but I think they go with DeSmith again on Monday. I don't think Silovs is going to get in until it's a back-to-back situation. And so far, DeSmith's been good. So DeSmith's been able to hold the fort thus far. I've seen comments about how he's going to fall apart and he's terrible. Why'd you guys pick him up? But he's been pretty good. He's been a pretty good backup for the Canucks, and he's been good while Demko's been out. So, yeah, for the Vancouver Canucks, this homestand's gone really well thus far. I think it helps that you're playing against teams that are outside of the playoff picture, but the Flames gave them a pretty good run tonight, so who knows what's going to happen on Monday. All right, number 6 on the board, dropping 1 spot from last week because they got passed. That's the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs, again, dropped to number 6 because they got passed. There's a team on a 17-game point streak, and they moved up past a couple of teams this week. So the Toronto Maple Leafs down at number 6, but I think they've shown that they belong in the top row. I know there's been a lot of people, he's got them too high. Why are they at 5? I haven't moved them down, and I feel like they play really well. So I really do think that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to be more dangerous come playoff time than they get credit for, but I've said that before. So we'll see whether or not that's the case this year. All right, number 5, moving up 2 spots from last week. I didn't think that Nashville was going to move up much further. I think Nashville's having an incredible run, and I think this is the perfect time to have that run. And they've pulled themselves within 5 points of the Winnipeg Jets. And I've got them ahead of the Jets and the Stars right now in the power rankings. There is a chance that Nashville ends up being in the top 3. There is a chance. I don't know if they get there, but I think the Central right now has 4 pretty good teams in it. And that means that at least one of them is going to be out in the first round, maybe 2. And that's a shame. If we end up seeing that is a shame. But I also will end it with this too, that it is good to have a league where good teams are guaranteed to be out in the first round. It shows just how deep your league is in terms of teams that are seen as contenders. So while people complain and get mad about the fact contenders are out in the first round, I think it shows just how many contenders there are this year. You can make a Stanley Cup argument for, I think, almost any team from 14 up. You can make a Stanley Cup argument for. In fact, before the playoffs start, between now and the playoffs, I'm going to do a video where I try to make the argument for how each team that's in a playoff spot wins the Stanley Cup this year. Number 4 on the board, dropping 2 spots from last week. I don't think there's a cause for alarm with Florida yet. Not yet. It's a lot of injuries. Injury issues will wreak havoc with the team. I think it's definitely put it in a position where it looked like Florida was just going to cruise to the division title. Maybe not now. The Boston Bruins have a chance to end up getting that top spot. But for Florida, they have games in hand. They're going to have to win. I think they have 2 games in hand on Boston. I think they're 3 points back with 2 games in hand. But yeah, they're going to have to win those. It's not always all that easy. And for Florida right now, there's just something not quite right. And I think it's the injuries that have hurt them. Number 3 on the board, moving up 1 spot from last week, Carolina Hurricanes. The Canes move up 1 spot. They're playing really well. They're at home against Toronto tomorrow. That game should be fantastic. Both of the first 2 meetings were close, so tomorrow's should be an excellent game as well. I'm looking forward to it. The Carolina Hurricanes moving up to number 3 from number 4 last week. There was some upset about them being number 4. I don't know if there'll be some upset over them being number 3, but here we are. Not a lot of movement this week, and this is really how the power rankings should be once you reach this point in the season, I think. Unless something disastrous or something miraculous happens, teams are going to stay in very similar positions from 1 week to the next. And number 2 on the board, moving up 1 spot from last week, the Colorado Avalanche. So the Avs move up to number 2. Again, they were number 3 last week. They're on an 8-game heater, 8-game winning streak. And in the event that the team that's in the first spot had actually lost in regulation tonight, Colorado would have been number 1. But the team that's in first place did not lose in regulation tonight. So Colorado gets the runner-up prize. But they could win again tomorrow. They're at home against Pittsburgh, I do believe. And, I mean, could they win that and go to 9 in a row? And then, of course, if they get the 10 wins in a row, you get a video on the 10-game winning streak. Then they lose their 11th game, and it's all my fault. So that's what I've learned over the years. Which brings us to number 1. And to the surprise of nobody, the New York Rangers, still number 1. They've won, 18 out of 22? I think it's 18 wins out of 22 for the New York Rangers. Just playing absolutely insane. And they were behind against Florida. It looked like they were probably not going to come back and win that, and then they did. So for the New York Rangers, they're getting their best goaltending from Shesterkin. Fox has really turned back into being Adam Fox. Not that he was playing badly, but he's been playing really, really well lately. And so, yeah, there you go. Your power rankings for this week from 1 through 32. And, so I know the comments are going to come in. They always do. And, so next season, of course, there won't just be team power rankings. There's going to be player power rankings as well. So I'm looking forward to doing that too, but that's next season. I'm not making the changes until next season, but there will be changes on the channel next season, and I'm looking forward to implementing those and having some fun with it. So thank you guys so much for watching as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.